had an amazing summit. I'm so excited to introduce you to our closing keynote session today, Dr. Revi Sterling. Again, should you have a question for Dr. Sterling during the keynote, please drop them into the Q&A section of the platform throughout the talk, and you'll have the option to upvote the different questions that come through before we go into the live Q&A. And those questions will then be shared with Dr. Sterling, and hopefully we can get to all of the ones, time permitting. For those that we don't get to, we'll share sort of a report of all of the questions that we can then send to Dr. Sterling after the session today. There's also an option to ask anonymously if that's something that you prefer. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our keynote, Dr. Revi Sterling.
Hello, my name is Revi Sterling, and I'm delighted to join this amazing community of mappers and data activists today. It takes a proven, powerful initiative like humanitarian OpenStreetMaps to move the needle in community development work and international development. And I'm looking forward to sharing examples of that from working with HOT and its partners over the last few years. We've known for decades that the only way to make sustainable positive change is with participatory programming. And yet in international development, almost every intervention is top-down, developed by experts sitting in Geneva or Washington, D.C., who claim to know what will work to lift people out of poverty because we've studied it so much. And this is not to disparage these people, I'm one of them, but to check the methods that we use and to check them really well. There's a reason why so many development efforts fail and communities are tired and wary of outside projects. We aren't including local perspectives and knowledge, and most often we aren't hearing from women. What I want to do in the next few minutes is share my experiences with HOT to show what a remarkable tool it is, as you all know, but in my case, in closing the gender digital divide, which is the area that I focus on, and how I've seen where mapping literally makes women visible and gives them opportunities for empowerment that couldn't be done in any other way. This little internet kiosk is in Matete, Kenya, and is part of a program that I worked on several years ago. And while this little stall is far from a paved road, it does provide internet, printing, and lamination services for the surrounding community. And one of the very first thing that the proprietor did was search for her kiosk, using good old Google Maps. In this case, I think it was Google Earth. But the fact is that this is what she wanted to do first, the second she had connectivity. And we've all seen the power of this. So when you have a true, indisputable online presence, you exist, at a global scale. And often I've seen this as one of the first requests. Let me see where I am. Let me put myself on a map. It's really a psychological boost. And in some ways, it's bigger as a boost than perhaps even the commercial potential of this kiosk. Development is inherently a psychological activity. It's a person deciding they want to make a change for the better, which is often full of tension and goes against social and cultural norms, especially where women are concerned. And then when you add technology to that, there's a whole different set of affordances and tensions that come when you're working at the intersection of development, gender, and technology. And to me, there are no more powerful forms of transformation than women and technology, and yet the two do not coexist very happily in most cases. We know that women's empowerment and advancement is absolutely the key to sustainable community development, because women take care of the education and the health and the general well-being of families and communities. We know that digital technology and services can scale and sustain programs in ways that were unimaginable 10, 20 years ago. But the fact is that women don't have the same opportunities to use technology for all sorts of reasons that go back to being recorded in 1997, when the first mobile phones and laptops were coming to community media centers and to families. Women have lower skills, they have lower purchasing power, they have lessened efficacy, self-efficacy and confidence than men. There's all of these barriers that are really well studied as to why women don't have the same access and use and experience with technology as men do. And yet technologists continue to think of technology and software, hardware, apps, etc., as just this agnostic, degendered tool that anybody can use. And the fact is that the social norms and cultural fabric is what dictates who gets to use what, how, and when. And women continually to be, are excluded from the same opportunities that men have with technology. The technology is not distributed equitably, and so information uptake and sharing is not an equitable activity. And to me, that's digital development shooting itself in the foot, because we just keep, in our quest to create equitable solutions, we actually exacerbate and in some cases introduce new ones. And that is not development. But this is where I think HOT has a very unique opportunity, because it really addresses social norms and opportunities in a way that make it both palatable and appropriate and super powerful in communities. Here's a case showing that. The incomparable Rebecca Fur, the student in Peru, working on a mapping project there that I had the privilege and honor to go visit. But in so many cases, in so many communities where you have women that don't have information, what does that mean, especially in a time of climate change and maybe political instability and COVID? How do you even interact anymore if you don't have a phone or the internet? And that's something that we have to keep in mind. 4 billion people do not have access to the internet. 1 billion people do not have a mobile phone or access to using a mobile phone. The greatest percentage of those two numbers, those populations, are women. And yes, we know the barriers, and yet it's really hard to get a technology company or development industry, development agency to say, yes, we're going to focus very specifically on the gender digital divide. And yet there would be a huge boon if they did. I mean, look at some of the economic statistics right there. But that's very hard to do when you look at this quote from Alliance for Affordable Internet, which I see again and again. If women and poverty mean that women do not have access, to phones and to the very information that could truly help them with sustainable development in their communities. In fact, many communities I work in have actually banned women's cell phone use and have banned internet use, and it's only working carefully and thoughtfully with the gatekeepers and the people, the husbands, the mother-in-laws, the churches and clerics and community leaders to understand the root issues of their fear of women online. Can we even start to change that? And that takes time, that takes budget, it takes a lot of effort, it takes special skills, and that's just not necessarily interesting or fast enough for a lot of tech companies that just want to make sure that women have cell phones and automatically they'll be entrepreneurs and we'll close the gender digital divide. If that was the case, we would have done it a long time ago. Of course, mapping requires technology, and the kind of technology available to poor and remote women, if they do have access to it, looks a lot like this. No, most of them outside of cities do not have smartphones, and we have to quit thinking in that mentality first and foremost. But, a lot of applications and services are built thinking that they have the same sort of, technology that we do, or that it's accessible. And yes, prices have come down immensely, and I think there's great promise in things like the KaiOS phone, where you can run Android apps on a smart feature phone that's much less of a price point than a smartphone. But on top of that, the applications and services are created by people like me. I am not a rural Tanzanian girl. I am not a woman outside of Cusco whose opportunities are limited by machismo and the patriarchy. And this is nothing new. Back in 1967, a computer scientist named Conway first talked about biases and prejudices in technologies that are perpetuated by the creators of it. We build things how we would use them. And half a century later, we are seeing the cases, in practice of the racism and sexism in the hardware and software that were not designed for the very people they were, that are using them now. These conversations are happening, especially with artificial intelligence and with health ethics, et cetera. And when women and other marginalized populations, start a mapping project, it just reverses that paradigm beautifully because, it's under their terms. They're using technology as a tool to address a different thing, a societal or environmental, issue, or some sort of, reason, some sort of issue that's driving the mapping. And it's a great way. I mean, I've just seen it. It's hard to explain, but you see that the project drives cell phone and technology adoption, and thus it's not seen necessarily as this disruptive technology that's going to affect the status quo and women are going to cheat now that they have phones and they're going to do this stuff. It's seen as a vehicle for improving a larger societal issue, and I've seen a lot less gendered dynamics and challenge women's use and uptake and adoption of mobile services. So in any case, I would also like to make a plug for the fact that we don't have great maps of women's technology usage. And that could be a whole different other talk about the indicators and data that we use to map the gender digital divide and how broken that is. But if you want another project, I'm your girl. Let's return to kind of looking at connectivity, though, and technology use by women, which is obviously prerequisite to doing any mapping. There is a persistent and growing gender digital divide, and that's not great news. Some countries have made some amazing efforts in closing the gender digital divide, but it actually is growing, and women's internet use and uptake of new technology is actually lagging at a rate far behind men, even though it is increasing annually. This growing gender digital divide is what really inspired the Women Connect Challenge, which I designed and have managed since its inception and now boasts 5 different global programs. HOT and its partners were award recipients of the first and what I think of as the most important round of Women Connect Challenge, because these initial projects formed the basis and the evidence base for what we know works and doesn't in getting more women online and engaging in digital development strategies. And again, from that first round forward, we see the recurrence of 5 proven strategies that are effective in engaging women, plus the people and institutions that influence women's lives, like husbands and community and religious leaders and institutions, and enable women to engage more digitally and then enjoy the benefits of those digital dividends. And what's remarkable, and most of our projects hit 1 or 2 of these beautifully. That's what they're designed around. HOT projects actually demonstrate all 5 of these proven strategies, which is a really huge accomplishment and a testament to the team and its thoughtfulness in program design and deployment, as the next 5 slides will show. If we start with social norms, you see that in this case, a 15-year-old boy who will likely be a father in the next few years himself has become aware of gender stereotypes in the home and professionally, and is able to contest these norms while tracking the spaces and places in his community that have conformist gender stereotypes and look at the opportunities to challenge them. And I really love that HOT and its partners put these beautiful pictorials together for our use. I think that there's no better power than quotes that come exactly from the people they're intended to use. And literally all the photos in this presentation have been the HOT projects that Women Connect Challenge has funded. So really excited to see that people really are using this. So I think that, hopefully Raymer will grow up to be an incredible chef in his community and show that example to both men and women. A female classmate in the same mapping project is experiencing that both boys and girls can map because she herself is mapping. And in doing so, she's experiencing the potential that mapping has and seeing that it can affect socioeconomic conditions because she's literally putting the truth on the map. At 15, these students are showing a maturity that cannot help but positively affect their futures as they go through this as a cohort, as a co-ed group of students that are going to be the next leaders in their communities. And by talking with some of these students, when I got to visit Rebecca and this project, they're already talking about the impact that this work is having on their parents and on their younger siblings. So the end-to-end impact of this HOT project in itself just cannot be underestimated. With our third effective strategy and proven practice, cultivating women's confidence, being able to do something that is at once visible and useful can't help but be a skills and confidence booster, as this quote shows. This is just amazing. Again, here's a 14-year-old girl who could very much already be in that thread of following the social norms that she was raised as part of, and she's looking at it and going, wait a minute, I can do this. And across my work for the last 20 years, I've heard from women and girls constantly that they're too dumb to use a phone or the internet or that software. They've really internalized the gender stereotypes that have been put on them, and they feel worthless to engage in their lives. And thus, they can't really have a meaningful development initiative participation because they're really stuck in the mindset that they are less than. And this kind of testament is what every young person could feel with these kinds of opportunities. And that comes from her mapping. So to me, this is it's both mind-blowing and also so obvious. And that's why there need to be more projects like this. And we're going to move over to our HOT project in Tanzania. Just take a little plane ride from Cusco. There is this need to create hardware and software platforms that, quote unquote, meet women where they're at. That we have to be able to support women's information needs, because if you have to learn another language, another skill, another this on top of learning the technology and trying to do your job and balance this, it's just a tax. And so for this female police officer in Tanzania, the mapping software directly helps her do her job. It's a direct benefit. She's gotten appropriate and useful training on it. It's not too cumbersome. It runs on her older model, hand-me-down smartphone, and the data and the information is timely and accurate, which is why she's been able to respond quickly to gender-based violence reports and save lives. And it was really remarkable. A teammate from mine on the Women Connect Challenge got to go and meet with this police officer and did a really wonderful video about this. And it's just amazing. Here's a woman who's so amazing already as a role model and a leader and someone truly saving women. And she realizes that she can do so much more because she has this mapping technology. Finally, mapping has helped this entire community to visualize the negative effects of gender-based violence, including female genital mutilation. I mean, having the data makes instances irrefutable, and that is what really is necessary to lead to the major shifts that are necessary in the laws, policies, and individual behaviors changing. And to me, that's really the power of the HOT platform and mappers and helping teach people how to map, is that then you have the data, and the data is the truth. As we've mentioned, for the communities where women are restricted from owning and using technology, we need to find out exactly why. What is the fear? Why is the shift in the status quo so alarming? How do we address these norms and barriers so that the gatekeepers will let women use phones and the internet? We need to find the ways where these gatekeepers can benefit from women's use. So I say that's absolutely the most important factor, is understanding under what conditions could women ever use technology in these environments. And then working with men. So many gender projects, make gender synonymous with women, when in fact gender means all genders. Gender and development organizations like Women for Women International, TOSTAN, CARE, and many others have worked on gender issues and sensitizing men to women's empowerment strategies for decades. So reading their literature, taking their recommendations, that's a really rich body that I try to center all of our work in. And then HOT does this better than anybody, pairing technology with, with social and societal problems. Sometimes the very best way to promote equitable technology use is to show how it supports, addressing concerns that the whole community shares. And we've talked a little bit about better data and better indicators, and I also think that's just a natural outcoming and outcropping of the data collection that comes from mapping, and could really help, the way that we actually count and measure the gender digital divide and women's empowerment. Next, we're talking about investing in those who are community bound. What I mean by that is that in many, but not all communities, women stay while men migrate. So for any development project to work with women, it's really important to have them as one of the anchor populations, because brain drain happens in communities, and training someone who will just leave might be great for them, but it's a lost opportunity to engage and upskill the women that will probably stay in the community long term and will be able to sustain the actual project. We always need to find ways to increase economic and respect opportunities in any of the initiatives that we work on, because then women become role leaders. They set an example for both men and women in their communities, and that's really where you can see development happen. One thing that's important is appreciating and recognizing the men and leaders who go out on a limb to promote women's empowerment. Other people will want this kind of acknowledgement, and that's a really great opportunity. People want a pat on the head, and so we say absolutely promote the positive deviance in behavior at the family and community level, and promote the positive deviance as humans who actually say, I really am going to let my wife do this, and we're going to enjoy the benefit of this. When starting a tech project, is there a woman who can lead it instead of a man? Be aware of your own biases and blind spots when you're assembling teams. That should be a no-brainer, but a lot of times we don't, because it's usually a man or a chief or someone that says, oh, I'll lead this. And we go, great, perfect, cool. So is there actually a woman that would be in a great place to do that instead? There's also been, as I've mentioned, over 20 years of work specifically on the gender digital divide. So you're not starting at square one, even though it might feel a little overwhelming to go through the literature. Find the people that know the space well and engage their knowledge so that you can find those opportunities to engage women and men proactively. And again, do meet women where they are. Making women come to an internet cafe or a school to use a computer to map or to do anything online absolutely can work for some women, but for others it can be a complete non-starter. Many women can't leave their homes, or they can't leave their children or their livestock. Many are not comfortable going to a new place and may need permission to do so. This is where we need to make sure that we come with a lot of hotspots and devices and training so that women can do digital work for wherever they are without risking their safety and privacy. We got to turn them into gig worker mappers. And the other two suggestions are really for the technology creators that are amongst us. We use a lot of hardware and software metaphors that simply don't translate well. What is a window to someone whose hut does not have a window? Or what is a file? That's kind of, not a term that gets thrown around very much in a lot of remote communities. So be relevant. Don't make people have to overlearn in order to have them access your software. So let's get better with our models and our metaphors. And then finally, pushing the limits of research and development. So many people think that digital development is a field where we have to dumb down the devices and the content, and we only have used and donated hardware to work with and really dire conditions. And in a lot of cases, yes, we do use a lot of donated hardware and hand-me-down phones. But, that's when we're working with low resource communities, it's not a question of how do we make this work for them in a lot of, yes, it is, but what I'm trying to say is the places where there's limited power, where there's, low connectivity, where there's low literacy rates, where there's language barriers, where there's crazy geographical conditions, this is a place where we can, it's a test bed for making better, more resilient and useful technologies. low resource communities have been green and organic and focused on conservation for a really, really long time, much longer than the US and it being trendy here. These places give us real life conditions that may have much wider application, which is why you're seeing some south to north technology transfer, because in places where the grid is unstable, you need to be, innovative with what you're doing. In places where communities are intermittently online, how do we make sure there's integrity of the data? And so, those are the cases in our world. Our grids are more unstable. Our connectivity is unstable. So there's a lot to do that I really think that when we design at the margins of technology, we're actually really pushing what we're able to do with it for the future. And that should really invigorate people in the research and development space, that this is an active, interesting space. And if you can solve some of these problems in the most challenging environments, it's only going to benefit people globally. Well, I am standing in the way of other activities and sessions, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk about how Humanitarian OpenStreetMap and its partners and all of you mappers are truly making this huge impact on a global scale, but also promoting ways to get women and girls online and connected more. And that just shows that there's a lot more impact to your work than you account for. So please keep up the amazing and inspiring work, because the change comes from the data and the data speaks the truth. And keep putting both issues and women on the map and having the double impact that you're having in most initiatives. I'd love to stay in touch. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I look forward to the rest of this incredible event.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Revi, for that talk.
Nothing like listening to yourself talk. Horrifying. But thank you, Anna. Hey, everybody.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an adjustment, to be sure. We have some questions coming in from the audience. So let's start with, do you have any examples of income generating opportunities, particularly for rural African women?
That's a great question. What I've seen a lot, that's been most successful, I think, with rural women, mostly in Africa and to a degree with the self-help groups in India, are communities that have village savings and loans programs or have some sort of club already, if that's a self-help group, if that's a group of community health workers, if it's an agricultural group, and oftentimes it's a VSLA, a village savings and loan. But often there's already an income, there's a savings portion of that and share outs and things like that. But also what I've seen is if those groups can sort of aggregate with other groups, and then they can go, wow, we actually have some serious power here. And if we all take our tomatoes together, we can do more, we can be more active participants and kind of demand our place on the value chain, et cetera. So I think the power really comes from the numbers. There's no lack of creativity and drive from rural women. It's mostly access to markets, and it's making, and that's really challenging because everybody has something that they're good at. And it'd be great if Etsy and some of these platforms, Novica, et cetera, could reach that far down. But if you're in a place where there's no working postal service, there's no shipping, you wouldn't even know where to start with things like taxes and tariffs and customs. That kind of thing is just is out of reach for you. So I think starting with what you already do at kind of the savings group level and self-help group level, making sure you're doing that at a regional or district level is a great first way to really put yourself on the map economically. And I also think there's smarter ways to, use phones where the data doesn't have to be such a tax on people. You look at the fact that, data plans are super expensive in so many places. Charging fees are really expensive in so many places. So if you don't have good rural electrification, if you don't have an ability to, if you have to leave your phone for 4 hours and hope it doesn't get stolen, I mean, there's no goodness in that. So I think we have to be smarter about the services that people are picking. And as application developers and users of these things and program designers, what's the low data piece? What can you move offline? Where can you move? If you're doing something, can you put a PV or solar panel in with the phones and the other things so people could actually generate some income off of charging other people's phones while they're doing theirs, as opposed to losing money, et cetera. So I think we have to be smarter about the total cost of ownership of mobile phones as well.
Yeah, certainly. Um, Great. So we have another question from Q&A around what was your entry point into this work? So maybe if you wanted to talk a little bit about your entry into closing the technology um,
Oh
gender
my God.
divide. But
Where did
also,
any of us start with this
yeah,
work? I mean, there's
I
just
know.
no pretty path. It did actually have a starting point, and that was I was doing software engineering at Microsoft, and I woke up one
Mm,
day, and every woman I had started with was no longer at the company. And that was where I realized that there was a gender divide. You know, I'd heard about it, that kind of stuff. Oh, women don't go into technology. And I'm like, well, tech's cool, and I'm a nerd, so I'm fine. Um, but I think that was really my first entree, kind of that first light bulb moment where it was like, where are the women? And why aren't there more women? And why are we having an attraction, retention, and promotion problem? And after working on that in a US and Western context for about 10 years, I really wanted to push myself. And I'm like, wow, if there's all these barriers and glass ceilings for someone who is as empowered and privileged as me, what's going to happen as technology starts proliferating around the world where there are some really critical social norms and gender barriers and, status quo issues that I never have to face. And that really started my whole work in digital development. And that was about in 2000.
amazing.
Sad
Thanks
part
for
is the
sharing
issues are
that.
still the
Yeah,
same. We're still not doing it right.
yeah. But it sounds like, I mean, from what you identified in your talk, now you have developed some proven sort of
And I think we
strategies.
we've and the people that have done this, we've known this for so long. I mean, that's just my
Mhm.
that's my little, the USAID 5 blurbs, right? And
Right.
we've
Mhm.
talked, we've certainly, those of us that have worked in this research and practice space for a long time, we all agree on these. There's nothing new in the findings. It's just more and more of an evidence base. And perhaps at a point, the evidence base gets so big that organizations and donors are like, oh, we should do that instead of dropping in a digital literacy program that doesn't make any sense for this community. So I think it
Right.
really is, we have all the evidence, we're just not being listened to.
Yeah. And that sort of ties into this next question. How do you know and ensure that your work is having the right impact and enough of an impact when developing scalable strategies? How do you ensure you're still impactful at scale?
Scale is a tough one because I think there's always a lot of trade-off between, I really love to go deep in one certain community because the deeper you can go with those specific cultural norms that may not exist one district over or one state over. So I get a lot of critique about, a lot of your programs don't scale. And I'm like, yeah, a lot of them are really meant for very specific issues around this group of Berber women in Southwest Morocco and the argon, oil community, and we're solving this gender and tech problem here. So certainly, I mean, my area of expertise is really going deep with very local solutions. I do think that through the proven strategies, you can be more. You can't replicate these programs, but you can certainly generalize the things out of them. So, who are the gatekeepers? All programs have gatekeepers. What are the preferred interfaces? Is it visual? Is it verbal? Is it animation? Is it text? So, figuring out, basically sets of preferences and barriers and capabilities of each community, my methodology always remains the same. And so you get certain things that do scale across that way. Impact is really tough because um, it's just such a hard field, as everybody knows. But the real key to impact is the closer you get organizations that work in the community and are trusted by the community and know it well. That's the key. Giving a grant to a huge organization that's based here out of DC and then subcontracts and subcontracts and subcontracts. By the time you get the impact data, I don't trust it. I don't know who these people are. I don't know the orgs. But if I'm working directly with, the organization that is at the school in Peru, in the case of in the case of the Hot Project, that's a whole different level of understanding their metrics for impact and then going, okay, so what makes sense in this very particular case? How are we going to measure? What's logical to measure, et cetera? So for each of the Women Connect projects, we really focus on setting up a set of metrics that are very specific to the culture and community of those projects. And some are not. some are not successful, obviously, for all sorts of unforeseen reasons, be it a mudslide or be it the fact that we just missed the ball entirely. But I think the closer you can work with local organizations, and how do you get much more local than mappers, the more success you have in actually having impact.
Yeah, great. And I think this, ties in well. And I think we have time for one more question. So this last question is, any recommendations or best practices for activities aiming to close the gender digital divide when confronted with local customs and norms that might not be having these conversations?
That is tough. That is a tough one because there are so many communities that are just not ready to go there. And I think that in the case of, especially with the first round of Women Connect, I mean, you take a look at the HOT project with, the Janet, the Tanzania group have been so active with. I mean, you're dealing with, FGM. It's a really sensitive topic. A lot of families are not ready to have that conversation. A lot of the people we worked with in Northern Nigeria on one of our projects were not ready to lift local bans on women's internet access because it was deemed immoral. And that's really where you work in these cases to understand under what conditions could women ever use technology. And, maybe the men, gatekeepers, mother-in-laws, employers, institutions, et cetera, say never. But I've actually never worked in a community in 23 years where that's been the case. Someone will say something, so, well, if I'm having a heart attack, she should be able to call it. You know what? That's a starting point. Okay, so you're concerned about your health. Did you know? Okay, so she can do that. Or I need to look at time. I want my wife on cloudy days to know which direction east is, so she can, so you can do prayer times. You start with things where the gatekeepers are okay with the information, and you just move slowly. You recognize that there's a threshold for risk and a threshold for experimentation, and you move super slowly because nothing, technology changes quickly. Culture and society do not change quickly. So they're just finding that fine line. And I'd love to talk to people more about their, specific questions and ideas and experiences with this, because I guarantee most people on this call are like, I already have done that. And here's some stuff I'd like to contribute to the corpus of knowledge on this. So I do hope people get in touch.
Yeah, definitely. We'll make sure to share out your contact information again in the chat, and we'll also share all of the questions that we didn't get to with you after as well. But wanted to thank you so much for that incredible session, Revi.
You're very kind. Thank you so much, Anna. I know I'm waiting in the way in Tyler's way, so let's get rid of me and move on to the man of the hour.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening.
So before closing out the 2021 HOT Summit, I want to invite Tyler Radford, HOT's Executive Director, back to the main stage for some closing remarks.
Anna, great. Thank you so much. It's really good to have all of you with us today. And wow, what an incredible event. What an amazing HOT Summit. This really has been a celebration of what we've accomplished together this year with, as Paula Healed by San said earlier, local wisdom, global empathy. I really appreciate the critical focus this year on some very, very complex issues: gender, inclusion, power, equity, on maps for understanding and maps for communicating our place in the world, maps for empathy. I would like to share a few of my own thoughts on these topics. And just to acknowledge, if you're still up late with us from the Africa and Europe time zone, you may be hearing some common themes that you heard earlier. But thanks for being with us for into the evening. So 1 year ago at the 2020 HOT Summit, I made a statement in which I promised to not only talk about what we've gotten right, but about how we'd like to embrace a much stronger culture of feedback and learning, and hope that by doing that, we can achieve great things with all of us here together. Today has been a day to reflect on what we've learned, and I'd like to leave us with my take on 5 things I mentioned last year, how we've done, and what's to come. So first, let's talk a little bit about money and a key theme for today, power. Last year, I asked us all a question: how might we transform HOT and make it something that enables people living in areas vulnerable to humanitarian crises or with high levels of multidimensional poverty to achieve their own audacious goals? For this, we really need to rethink how funding decisions get made and what form funding takes. We need new forms of microgrants, what I called earlier microgrants version 2.0, Still grants, no longer just micro. We have some really exciting stuff happening on this, and I would love to share a few of those things with you. In Tanzania, we're experimenting with devolved microgrants, providing our partner, Open Map Development Tanzania, funds to completely own the process of grant making in their country. They have independently selected 8 grantee projects to grow and diversify the OSM community outside of major cities and the capital. And OMDTZ is providing ongoing training and support throughout the year. In the Asia Pacific region, we're trying out booster grants. These funds will give a longer-term boost to OSM communities that are already carrying out significant mapping and community building work, and we just signed the first 3. In Eastern and Southern Africa, we're experimenting with community action grants up to $20,000 US for communities to solve real challenges with OSM data, and impact grants, providing up to $45,000 US if that community works together with a government or NGO data user for even more impact. So what does all this mean together? We know that in many cases, money means power. And this year, we are providing hundreds of thousands of dollars directly to communities to do the mapping they want to do. Number 2, sustainable open mapping ecosystems aren't built only on data, and we've heard a lot about this today. They are built by people. We want to invest in people as a way to spark the fire of open mapping in even more places. I've been so proud to see what our 19 data quality interns have accomplished in recent months, completely validating 62 mapping projects so far, and we hope growing the validation community over the long term. Thanks to support from Meta with skills building, professional development, from Contour, Mapbox, OSGeo, and so many more community members. In the Asia Pacific region, just last month, we announced the launch of She Leads, She Inspires, a program co-created with women in the OSM ecosystem that will contribute to the development of 100 women leaders over the next year across all of Asia. Number 3, local power and autonomy. We have talked a lot about these core values over the past year and including today at the summit. We need to live up to them and truly embody them within our own structures and our own organizational culture. One of the changes I'm most proud of since last year is that we've launched open mapping hubs for the Asia Pacific region, Eastern and Southern Africa region, and West and Northern Africa, made up of staff entirely from those regions. This is dramatically increasing our ability to partner and serve communities in those places. And today I'd like to leave us with 2 more major changes. Effective December 1st, HOT's global tech team will no longer report to me, but instead to our regional directors. By doing so, we want to make it very clear that community partners in each region, represented by many of you on today's summit, and convened by HOT's regional team and regional director, are going to call the shots on technology priorities that matter locally. We know we'll be successful if and only if community members find the tools that we develop to be useful for your goals. Also effective December 1st, HOT's donor-funded field projects will no longer report to a global field programs team, but instead to the regional director covering the country where the project takes place. This indicates an important shift. Projects with partners and donors are still very important, but they need to be designed by and led by community partners with support from Open Mapping Hub staff where needed. Number 4, where we failed and what we're doing about it. So a year ago, we committed to do more of our thinking in public, things like documenting our work openly, thinking and making decisions in the open. There have been some great examples of working more openly, but some teams fail to do this on a consistent basis. Admittedly, we had an inward focus in the past year. We've been really focused on building the team, the foundation we need to support the open mapping movement at scale over the coming 4 years. And in doing this, we also had committed to put serious time, effort, and resources into data quality. The working group is doing some great things there, but we failed to build a staff team to support that effort. So as of December 1st, I'm very happy to announce that Paul Uthal, who currently oversees our field programs and disaster services, will move into the role of Director of Data. So in this role, Paul will serve as our top staff member in charge of data policy and practice, coordinating across HOT teams, regional teams, working groups, and community partners. Paul's team is here to serve. So starting in January, the team will launch new services for community members. And just as a few examples, these might take the form of training, support designing data collection projects, enhanced data quality tools and processes, and guidance on data ethics questions. Fifth, and finally, the future of humanitarianism and open geodata is not about HOT. As we've heard throughout today's presentations, it is really about a global effort, a global movement. It is all of us here today across hundreds of organizations and groups working to make an impact through open geodata. Now, partnerships are incredibly important to achieve this, and I'm very happy to announce that just last week, HOT was accepted as a member of NetHope, a global consortia of the world's largest nonprofits and technology innovators. NetHope has helped HOT expand our global open mapping movement from mapping together with NetHope member NGOs to developing innovative technology with corporate partners. So in closing today, I'd like to just give a huge shout out and a very big thank you to the Summit Working Group organized by Rachel Van Niest, Dana Galati, Imam Mwanja, Jeffrey Katarega, Shamila Nasozi, all our moderators, our tech and our room volunteers, our comms team, and our sponsors. Thank you for making today possible. And one more important announcement, we're going face-to-face next year in 2022. We're currently evaluating several options for an in-person summit, and I very much hope to get the chance to meet together with you once again. So until that time, we'll see you online, and I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, we have a couple questions, and if people want to continue to drop those in the Q&A, we can try and get to them. So the first question is, now that HOT is a member of NetHope, will that mean offline communities in rural Africa can get devices they need?
Great. So I'm happy to take that one. I think that was potentially that question might be referring to a program that we ran in coordination with NetHope in the past, which was called like Device Challenge. And through that program, we NetHope and NetHope sponsors helped us to supply basic devices like phones to rural communities without, as was pointed out earlier, to many places and many people who don't currently have access to phones. So that was a program that NetHope was running in the past. It's certainly something that we can consider again. And I think part of the discussion today is and part of the discussion and reason for us forming regional hubs is to really work with those regional teams, provide insight into the needs that you're hearing about and seeing about in your communities, and let's take decisions on what best to do together. So thanks for that.
Yeah, of course. The second question is, She Leads sounds like a great idea. If it's successful, will it be replicated in other areas or geographies like Africa?
Yeah, most definitely. So we have one of our major goals for this year is to really increase the representativeness of people contributing in OpenStreetMap. And we're taking a couple first steps to this, and She Leads, She Inspires is really a first step. It's a first experiment to see how this might look with 100 women in the Asia Pacific region. I would very much love to scale that up if it's successful and the participants find it to be valuable. Again, we're trying different things in different regions, and this was a need that kind of emerged from Asia Pacific. And there's definitely space to talk about how it goes over the next year and potentially replicate in more places.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tyler. Well, I think that's it for the questions. But if you want to add any final remarks, Tyler, feel free to do so.
Yeah, just to reiterate again, I'm very much appreciative of everybody's time and being here. It was a really energizing event and kind of reinvigorated the spirit and the purpose of what we're doing. So I really, really enjoyed the past 24 hours. I hope you did too, and really look forward to meeting each of you in person in the coming year.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tyler, for those closing remarks. Truly an inspiring ending to what has been an amazing summit with 535 registered attendees representing 82 countries. A word of thanks and gratitude to each and every one of our speakers today. We appreciate your time and commitment so much. Another shout out to our sponsors that helped enable this summit to happen: Meta, AWS, Esri, and Critigen. And of course, a huge thanks to each of you that spent some time with us today across all 3 time blocks. Without you, none of what we're working on would be possible. And we look forward to hoping that this summit today sparked some ideas and will lead to continued conversations, partnerships, and learning from all the people that attended the summit today. Before signing off, we wanted to announce the top 5 teams for our Goose Chase game. We had 7 teams that completed all 33 missions and then verified submissions to get the final total points. Geo Karalam is our top team with 6,075 points, followed closely by OSM Ethiopia with 6,050 points. Team 19% came in with 5,825 points, and Africa Geomappers and ESA tied for 5th place with 5,625 points. A huge effort by all. Summit Working Group will follow up for all of those eligible for the prize swag packs. All right, please keep healthy and safe, and we'll see each of you in OpenStreetMap. Make sure to let us know if you enjoyed the summit via the final poll. Keynote recordings are available now via the replay feature on Hopin, and the remainder of the talks will be on HOT's YouTube within a week. Goodbye and happy mapping. Thank you all so much.